the analysts are saying, look, these big Wall Street buyers, they only make up about 1 to 3% of the total single family,
Yeah.
housing stock nationwide. That number's a little bit higher in cities like Atlanta, Charlotte, Houston, Dallas, places like that. But the institutional buyers, the big companies, they're kind of already changing their strategy. It
Right.
turns out 81% of all new home acquisitions by invitation homes are kind of, I think, the biggest one. They were build to rent units. That means that these big Wall Street buyers, they're actually building homes specifically to rent. So that's most of their marketplace anyway. And there's a special carve out in Trump's executive order for this not applying to build to rent. So,
Right. And that alone allows them to continue to do what they're doing. They just have to buy the land, build the house, and rent it all in one fell swoop, essentially, at this point.
welcome to Silberman Realty's Property Desk Podcast, Episode 9, where we talk about all things residential real estate in Texas. Today is January 28th, 2026. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the company and your host, and I'm joined by my co-host, Robert Vernon, who's a real estate agent with
You guys
Silberman Realty. Robert, how are you doing today?
doing all right? You staying warm over there?
We've had some cold weather in Texas, very, very much so. We haven't lost power, so we've been fortunate this time. Nowhere near as bad as the freeze of 2021, which was actually life-threatening. So
Yeah, luckily they changed the power grid a little bit since then to make sure we had enough power. So
that's always
a little bit better this time around.
always a good thing. We're no longer a third world country in Texas. So,
Right. It's
all
good.
right, well, let's talk about what's coming up on the show today, what we're going to discuss. We've got Trump's ban on institutional investors, Wall Street, buying single-family rental homes. We're going to talk a little bit about Houston and listing the most expensive condo ever in the city by far, like way
Ooh,
by far, like $14 million. That's over
wow.
at the St. Regis condominium, branded condominium development. Then we'll answer some owner 1099 questions. That's property owner questions about 1099 since we're in that tax season. Talk a little bit about eviction reform, big news on new laws dealing with evictions that took effect this January 2026. And then we'll talk about census data. The new census data is out. Good news, Texas is still growing, but the growth is slowing. So
Yeah.
let's
Depends on who you ask. Could be a good thing or a bad thing.
yeah. All right, let's go ahead and kick it off with sort of a little bit of news. President Trump signed an executive order which attempts to ban single family house purchases um, by big institutional investors. That term remains to be defined. It doesn't really do that. He's asking Congress to pass a law to ultimately do that. But the order directs HUD, Housing, Urban and Development, and the Federal Housing Finance Agency stop insuring, guaranteeing, securitizing these loans. It says, hey, give regular home buyers, a first look at any pre-owned government foreclosures. And it tells the Department of Justice to start investigating some of these big Wall Street buyers for anti-competitive practices. So, what do you think, Robert? Is this going to have any effect on the housing market?
Maybe a little bit. Timing is, peculiar about it, right? Kind of before midterms, get little things that look a little happier to the masses when it comes to the housing market, which has been in the pits. Also kind of convenient. Institutional buyers kind of are done.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, at the moment they've already bought everything. It's easy to slap them with the ban when they've already got it their hand in the cookie jar. And once you force them to sell those properties now, and then we might be talking a little bit. But I think at the end of the day, they're only like 1 to 5% of the full pool of buyers out there. The ones that you really got to worry about, I guess, are like your mom and pop shops. Like there's a lot of smaller investors out there who are buying these properties and flipping them. And it's good though, because it's getting a lot of the bad, rundown properties in the neighborhood fixed up, bodies back in them. But they make a bigger portion of the what I would call institutional buying, even if they're not truly institutionals. Um, you just kind of gave them a bigger runway for more homes to
Yeah,
purchase, is what I
and
see.
that's a good point. I mean, the analysts are saying, look, these big Wall Street buyers, they only make up about 1 to 3% of the total single family,
Yeah.
housing stock nationwide. That number's a little bit higher in cities like Atlanta, Charlotte, Houston, Dallas, places like that. But the institutional buyers, the big companies, they're kind of already changing their strategy. It
Right.
turns out 81% of all new home acquisitions by Invitation Homes are kind of, I think, the biggest one. They were build to rent units. That means that these big Wall Street buyers, they're actually building homes specifically to rent. So that's most of their marketplace anyway. And there's a special carve out in Trump's executive order for this not applying to build to rent. So
Right, and that alone allows them to continue to do what they're doing. They just have to buy the land, build the house, and rent it all in one fell swoop, essentially, at this point. But I think they were already moving that direction, so that's why he got the graces of the big donors to do this kind of type of ban before he put it in place. And he saw another reason for it to help him out. It would give him a little bit of boost in the midterms. And we all know Trump loves the polls. So whatever's going to get his poll numbers up, he'll say it.
yeah, this could be just a midterm play for certain, right? I mean,
Mhm.
now I've got
Yeah.
another question for you. I was thinking about, buying some single family rentals, and then I was thinking about, well, is there an easier way to do it? Because it's not passive income. I mean, owning single family rental, if you're a mom and pop out there and you want to buy some, it's really not truly passive. I said, well, let me take a look at some of these big institutional operators like Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent, and Blackstone, and their dividend yield is about 3.4 to 4.4%. Let me ask you. So, assuming the best yield you can get on owning your own single family rental is 7%, 6%, assuming that's as good as it gets, and even that might be difficult. Now, no bias. We're a property management company, so we obviously want people to buy their own single family rentals. Would you rather hold Invitation Homes, the REIT, at a 4.4% dividend yield? Or would you rather go out and buy your own single family rental just off the cuff?
Yeah. Man, that's tough. It's not a one size fits. I mean, you can obviously get into your REIT with as little as like
Yeah,
$10, and start getting a little bit of pull of all that. But, you're not getting that real appreciation of the property, which is a lot of people like, and you're not getting the tax write-offs, the depreciations and things, and the other benefits that you get for being a single family home owner also. So I guess it's not like a one size fits all. I think if you have a pretty sizable amount of money to invest and you wanna grab a dividend, there's some good REITs out there that you could grab. I know Realty Income is one that pays out a monthly dividend that's pretty nice. But again, I think you should diversify. You could have a little bit there, a little bit into single family. But again, it's not one size fits all. I mean, if you're going into the market right now and you're buying what you would consider maybe higher interest rates, rents have been a little bit suppressed. Take a little bit more of a risk right now buying a rental property than 4 or 5 years ago. But we could be moving into an administration that's going to allow prices to continue to appreciate. So, and historically, prices do appreciate. If you look at asset prices, they're going straight up in the air. So, if you don't want to own cash,
sure.
it's nice to own property,
Yeah.
have assets. If it's not in a REIT, own it in a single family. Own both.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
for me personally, it's hard to say. There are pros and cons to each. I mean, if you buy the REIT, it is truly passive income, right? You don't get the middle of the night, kind of phone calls from our property management company is,
Very
yeah,
much.
say,
Yeah.
hey, by the way, we just had a freeze and water's all over the place, and we need 5 grand right away to do emergency
Your
repairs.
your REIT doesn't lose a job and needs to
You're
break the
right.
lease.
My
So
biggest thing, if I buy the REIT, can I really trust the REIT? I mean, can I trust that Invitation Homes is a good operator? Can I trust that, the homes really are valued at what they say they are? I mean, I don't know. I mean, well,
as a boots on the ground
mm,
realtor who's been into some of those
yes,
homes and who has represented tenants at our properties who used to live in those properties, most of them are run down.
Yeah.
They're not cared for very well. They're band-aided. They're basically just a cash flow for the REIT. They don't care if it's kept up.
Yeah.
They just want the person living there. And I always hear they can't ever get anybody on the phone to talk about any maintenance issues, and things always break down on them. So those homes really do have some deterioration factors to
Well,
it.
the executives over there, they want to keep the dividend flowing, and
Absolutely.
that's obviously in Congress with providing good tenant service. So you may get better service from a mom and pop operation if you're a tenant. But yeah, I don't. My biggest thing is I really don't know if I don't know if I can trust these big operators. Are they kicking deferred maintenance down the road, or what are these properties really worth? What's the real book value of these? I don't know, but
Well, you're only as good as the public thinks you are. And look, we get so many people that come in and put in applications, inquire to see our properties all the time. One of the main things they always ask me, who owns the property? Is it being managed in Florida? Is it being managed in, Arizona and these other places? They know, the masses of the renters, they know about those types of properties that are, in these REITs, and they don't want to live there.
Yeah.
And they talk on social media, they talk amongst themselves, and that's a big deterrent. And we actually do get a lot of renters because they can talk to me on the phone. I can tell them, yes, your landlord is a human being that I have spoken to, who has an actual address in America, who cares about this property, and that goes a long way with tenants and getting an actual good tenant in a property as well.
And I'll also point out that there's no tax advantages. If you own the REIT, you don't get the tax advantages. So if you're a mom and pop or an individual investor, you own the actual asset, you're going to get depreciation. So that helps a lot. Non-cash expense if you actually own the asset.
Right.
That's a big one. You also get leverage. If you own the asset, you can put 20% down and get a traditional kind of loan. I guess technically you could leverage the acquisition of your Invitation Home, REIT investment shares or whatever, but that's kind of impractical for most people, but much easier if you're an individual investor to go out and get a loan on an investment house than it is to kind of leverage an equity. There's also some liquidity issues on both sides. If you own single family housing rentals, if you actually own the asset, that's not very liquid. When you have to sell it with the realtor, it takes a while. If you own the actual REIT, selling the shares pretty easy. So different pros and cons there for what whether you're gonna buy the REIT or choose to buy the actual asset. And again, we're a property management company, so we benefit through more business if people are buying assets and having us manage them. But we try to present it as in a way that's not super biased. But all right, let's go ahead and move on to sort of a next little bit of news. Robert, are you familiar with the St. Regis kind of branded condos? I think they're all over the country. Have you heard of these things?
I feel like I've heard the name, but I don't step foot in places that high end very often. So no, tell me what you got.
You're not that kind of guy. So
not usually.
Well, so St. Regis is a kind of a fancy brand. There's a hotel group, and they've lent their brand, I think, to some condo developments. Houston has never been a place for high-rise condos. The DFW area, Dallas specifically, has always been sort of ahead in that game. And this just sort of caught my attention. This condo project over in River Oaks, which is a fancy part of Houston, they've listed this penthouse they've got available, $3,100 per square foot. They're listing it for $14.5 million. Yeah, $14.5 million.
Wow.
The last sold condo was somewhere around 5 to 7.5. So this is like double the most expensive thing we've ever sold.
So why do they think they're the prettiest on the block? What's going on with them?
I mean, you tell me if it's worth it. I mean, 90 condos, 37-story tower, nice neighborhood. This is the amenities they're offering. The 20th floor cognac bar. So
Yeah.
the deck, they're going to have a deck with cabanas. They're going to have a spa. And then this is the big thing. They're going to have an entire building generator. So when the power goes out, like Texas, 'cause when we have a freeze, you're nice and comfortable in the in your $14 million
Well then.
condo. So
Thanks. Well then, yeah, I don't think they might sit there for a little while unless a new Astro player gets a nice big contract to try to
yeah,
compete with the Dodgers. He might be able to afford to live down there closer to the field.
that may even be beyond the reach of many Astros players. Although there are some obviously out there with gigantic contracts that might be
The
able
way they're
to.
going these days in baseball, you never know.
Yeah, it just caught my attention. We'll see if it gets sold.
Yeah.
That's a big reach for a Houston, Texas condo. So, all right, let's go ahead and answer some owner questions. This is our management minute for property management questions. 1099s, if you're an owner, you've got a 1099 miscellaneous and a 1099 NEC non-employee compensation. We're talking about 1099s miscellaneous. This is the one where we report rent income to our owners. We get this question all the time, and basically, okay, I just got my 1099. The amount doesn't match what I actually received in rent. And it's like, okay, I get my 1099 says I got 5 grand in rent, and but I actually only received 4 grand. Oftentimes that's a timing issue. Okay. So you might
Mhm.
get if for example, if our management company, if we get rent in December and we don't distribute that until January, then your 1099 is still going to report that you like the owner received it because we're your agent, and that's the same as constructive possession of the rent. So there's some timing differences there. A lot of people also don't realize is that these 1099 figures, they include all kinds of accounting GL codes. All right, like prepaid rent, which is technically an asset. Things like deposit forfeits, which is an income account. So all kinds of stuff that's going into that 1099 figure. Robert, have you ever had owners ask you about 1099s or not so much?
Oh yeah, especially this time of year. There's usually the discrepancy that you mentioned about, hey, the rent doesn't match, and then they don't think about the fact that they had to pay a commission to rent out the property that year, which came from the rent funds that we received. So it was actually funds that they received, but then they have funds that go out.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen. And then, like you said, the year lap is usually another one that hangs them up
Yeah.
because they're seeing it in their eyes as already earned, but even though it wasn't distributed yet, then it actually comes onto their next year. So it is something that we see every year around this time. We get about 4 or 5 owner calls, a little bit more questions about those types of things.
Yeah, and I think we do have a report that we can give people that shows the full ledger where you can see the debits and credits and how your 1099 is calculated, and that can be helpful from an explanation standpoint. I have told owners this just to give them kind of a higher level explanation, and I don't think the owners like it, but we use Appfolio. That's APPFO LIO, probably the largest property management software company in the United States. And I just told the owners, and I've never seen Appfolio be wrong in calculating this thing, and we've used Appfolio for 15 years now. Um, it's just it's a very automated process. Their GL accounts are automatically selected. The property managers don't typically change that. We do not mess with that setting. And these 1099s are being generated by Appfolio for thousands of property managers across the country. They're just not wrong. It's that calculated. It's that automated. And if you have a question, you probably need to call your CPA or your tax person or your accountant. Our management staff is just not qualified to explain why the 1099 is being calculated that way. It's just not something the individual property manager has a knowledge of doing. So
Yeah, as rule of thumb, you should always ask a CPA when it comes to a tax related question anyways. You should rely on people who are, you know, good at placing properties and managing properties, tax questions.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think what most owners are probably doing with these things is they're taking their 1099s and they're starting with that as their top line revenue number, and then from there you're doing your deduction. So get with your tax person if you've got questions. So yeah, that's the more common thing we get with 1099s. All right, let's talk about this new Texas eviction reform that took effect January 26th. Robert, have you heard of this?
Oh yeah, definitely. Lots of good things came from this.
Well, it depends if you're a tenant or a landlord. So, Senate Bill 38, 89th legislative session. And yeah, so we think it's a good thing because we're a property management company, Robert. So we want to streamline the process here. I think one of the biggest changes for us is when our tenants are late, what we do sort of as an automatic procedure is we have to send out notice to vacates. And that starts the eviction process. Now, the problem is prior to the change in law, you used to have to send notice to vacates via certified mail or regular mail. There wasn't an electronic option to do that. Well, that's very time consuming on our part. And the owners also end up paying, postage. Postage is not cheap anymore.
It does streamline everything, like you said, much faster. You don't have to wait for the time. You don't have to wait for deliveries. You don't have to wait for, sign on deliveries from the tenant. It can be done in 10 to 20 days now, essentially. And they can't argue anything else at the court where they used to be like, oh, well, they're not fixing this and that. The judge doesn't want to hear that anyways. Well, now they have to file a whole other suit if they want to do that. It's all about non-payment of rent, nothing else. So it
Right.
also makes it easier for the landlords to get
Yeah,
the
that's
tenants out
right.
of there.
And on not your point on not arguing anything on the courthouse. That's the part of the law that says they're not allowed to bring counterclaims. So practically, we'll have to see
Right.
how how
Yeah.
how, how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, now the TAR lease, Robert, you use the Texas Association of Realtors lease. And in order to not send the electronic notice to vacates, there has to be an agreement I mean, in order to be able to send electronic notices to vacate, there has to be an agreement in writing. So the Texas Association of Realtor lease has been revised to kind of allow that. So you may have noticed that change. So
Oh yeah. There's quite a few changes in there now. Also, we can also
yeah.
put renter's insurance in the leases now, or before that was not part of it.
Okay.
So
They've got a form. I haven't seen the renter's insurance thing, but that's pretty cool. So um the
yeah.
biggest change to this eviction reform is this summary disposition process. And this is if the landlord, you don't need, you can have this ex parte hearing where you can get an eviction where the tenant doesn't even get a trial, which is crazy to think about, right? And there's some questions of whether that violates due process. But that's like what happens if yeah,
That's your world.
well, I mean, it's pretty cool. I'll tell you about it. If
Yeah.
if you're a landlord, okay, and you file your eviction petition, you can file a sworn affidavit with your eviction petition that just says, "Hey, there's no dispute, and the tenant owes rent." And then the tenant has 4 days to rebut it, file a response to rebut it. And if the tenant doesn't do that, or even if the tenant does, the JP court judge can just choose to, rule without a trial, which is crazy to think about. If the
Wow.
JP court judge determines that there are genuinely no disputed facts that would have prevented judgment, the JP court judge can do that. So that's probably the biggest change on this deal.
So what's the point of that? Is that just to streamline the process more for them, backlogs and
Yeah, it's just
timing?
it's just to make landlords easier it's a very landlord favorable provision that allows landlords to really get these tenants out of here quickly. That's what it does. So it's
Well, if you're listening to this and you're a potential landlord out there and you live in another state, just know Texas has your back as a landlord. It is a very landlord friendly state here.
yeah,
Unlike some places like California and Oregon, Colorado, I know it's complete opposite.
yeah. You're not in California anymore. That's for certain. Well, welcome to the
Yeah.
land of we pay rent. So, all right. All right, let's go ahead and talk about our final topic. This is a little census news. We're still growing in Texas, Robert. We added 391,000 new residents. That's more than any
Whew.
other state. More than any other state. We
I believe
doubled
it.
we doubled Florida's increase, so which ranked second. As far as percentage growth, now we were there were two other states that were higher, or three other states: North Carolina, South Carolina, and Idaho. I don't know why, Carolinas and Idaho are booming. So from a growth percentage standpoint, I don't know why, but there you have it. However, here's the
I can
how.
tell you why.
Oh, tell me why. Why is
Oh,
Carolina
it's
and Idaho so popular?
because still had cheap housing relative to what they all had to offer there. Think of Texas, 2008,
Yeah.
2007, and that is exactly where those states are right now. And they will boom, and their housing will go up just like ours did, and they will be just like where we are in about
Okay.
10 years.
So housing is affordable. Robert is saying housing is affordable in the Carolinas and in Idaho. So, all right.
Yep.
So here's the but, and there's always a but. We
Okay.
The growth has slowed a little bit. In fact, we were down 43% from the previous year. And it looks like this downturn is likely to continue. Some of this is immigration based. Okay. For international immigration, a little under half of our growth came from international immigration. That's no longer happening anymore. So I guess that's because of ICE and all the anti-immigration stuff we have going on with the Trump administration. And then our natural change, like births minus deaths, right? So if you look at people being born and dying, that's kind of flat. So um, and then our domestic immigration, people coming from other states to Texas, that fell to only 67,000 people. That's the lowest level since 2010. And it's down from the high of 2022. So when everybody was coming to Texas after COVID, we're down 70% from that peak. So
Well, I mean, you had parabolic run there, so it's gonna eventually come back down to the mean a little bit. And then you also have, like you said, the immigration, and just to add to that, Greg Abbott just, I believe yesterday, just signed on to stop H-1B visas into the state of Texas till 2027, which is also a huge influx of the population that we've been receiving. So that'll also put a bottleneck to that.
yeah, as you point out, Robert, what goes up must come down. We've been very high on domestic immigration for a long time, and I think we're coming back down to earth. You feel that way about the stock market, Robert? This isn't a investment show. You think the S&P 500 what goes
No,
up must?
I think right now we have a dollar devaluing at a rapid rate. Own assets or be left behind. That's going to be the theme of the 20s.
Okay,
So
Robert
I see
says
that's
Robert's on the record as saying buy everything, guys, buy everything.
doesn't matter what it is. Don't own cash.
All
Cash
right,
is
and
trash.
all right. On that note, that brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Robert Vernon has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice or investment advice. And this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a question about real estate or something you'd like us to cover, email us at info@silbermanrealty.com and tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great rest of your week.
Have a good one.